The annual family reunion was held this year at a beautiful, remote cabin deep in the mountains. The location was idyllic, a large wooden lodge surrounded by pine trees, with a clear stream running nearby. For the first 2 days, the atmosphere was cheerful and calm. My parents, Eleanor and Robert, smiled often. My older brother, Daniel, was laughing loudly, telling stories about his latest big-money deals in the city. My sister, Chloe, the so-called free spirit, was sketching quietly by the fire. I, Liam, the middle brother, was the quiet observer. I watched the dynamics, the subtle shifts in mood, and the unspoken histories that always defined our family. We all had our roles. Mom, Eleanor, was a perfect matriarch, the keeper of the peace. Dad, Robert, was a silent, respected patriarch. Daniel was a golden child, the successful businessman everyone admired. And Chloe and I were the background players. The surface was smooth, but I knew the undercurrent was strong. I had noticed how Daniel always paid cash for everything, even small items, and how Dad often looked worried when Daniel spoke of the spending. The unspoken tension felt heavier this year, because Daniel was, as usual, dominating the conversation with his tales of success. He claimed his new job was paying him an astronomical salary, and that he was investing in property overseas. Everyone listened with admiring eyes, especially Mom, who beamed with pride. Daniel's success was one of the central pillars of our family's identity. He represented the stability and achievement that Mom and Dad had always dreamed of. "It's just amazing, Daniel," Mom cooed, placing an extra-large slice of cake on his plate. All that hard work finally paying off. "You deserve the very best, darling." Daniel smiled, accepting the praise easily, but I watched him closely. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes, and his hands, usually so steady, kept nervously fiddling with his expensive watch. If he was so rich, why was he wearing the same suit he wore 3 years ago? And why did he seem so jumpy whenever Dad asked a direct question about his actual job title? Chloe caught my eye from across the room. She rolled her eyes slightly, a shared moment of skepticism about Daniel's endless boasting. Chloe was often judged for her choice to pursue a low-paying artistic career, but she was the most honest person I knew. Daniel's polished perfection always made her seem less than, even though her happiness was genuine. Later that evening, after the campfire died down, the underlying tension became tangible. I was helping Dad clean up the lounge area when I found something tucked deep into the cushion of the sofa where Daniel had been sitting all afternoon. It was a manila envelope. I reached in and pulled it out. It was addressed to Daniel, but it wasn't a standard letter. The return address was a law firm I didn't recognize, and the corner of the envelope was stamped in red, stark letters. Final notice. Debt recovery. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a bank statement or a bill. This was a serious legal threat. It shattered the entire illusion of Daniel's success. He wasn't rich. He was struggling, desperately trying to keep up the appearance he had built. I immediately slipped the envelope into my back pocket. I didn't want to expose Daniel publicly yet, but I knew I couldn't ignore this. The man who claimed to be investing millions overseas was being threatened by a debt collector. I excused myself and walked outside. The mountain air was cold and clean, a stark contrast to the sudden, heavy weight of the secret I now carried. I opened the envelope under the pale light of the moon. Inside was a final warning. Daniel owed nearly $80,000 and faced immediate court action if the payment wasn't made within 2 days. I looked back at the warm, glowing windows of the cabin. My brother was inside, lying easily to our parents, enjoying cake, while his real life was crumbling around him. I knew I had to confront Daniel immediately. His lie wasn't just affecting him. If a debt collector showed up at our house, it would devastate Mom and Dad. I needed the truth, and I needed to know how deep the debt went. I walked back inside. Daniel was laughing loudly at one of Mom's stories. He looked exactly like the golden boy, untouchable and successful. I walked up to him and tapped him lightly on the shoulder. "Daniel, can I talk to you for a second?" "Outside, please." He frowned, annoyance flashing across his face. "Can it wait, Liam? Mom is just telling a great story about Dad's old car." "No," I insisted, my voice quiet but firm. "It really can't wait." Daniel sighed dramatically, rolling his eyes at Mom before following me outside onto the dark porch. What is so urgent, Liam? Did you lose your keys? I didn't answer. I pulled the crumpled manila envelope out of my pocket and handed it to him. This fell out of the sofa. You might want to explain this before a process server finds you. Daniel's face went from annoyance to terror in an instant. He snatched the envelope, his hands shaking violently. His mouth opened and closed silently, unable to form a plausible lie. The mask of success cracked, revealing the desperate, frightened man underneath. Liam, you can't tell Mom and Dad, he pleaded, his voice a low, frantic whisper. It's a mistake. It's just a misunderstanding with an old vendor. I'll take care of it. $80,000 is not a misunderstanding, Daniel. I countered. You haven't had a job for 8 months, have you? You're bankrupt, and you've been lying to us all year. The accusation was too direct. Daniel completely snapped. His fear turned into a defensive rage. And what business is it of yours, Liam, the guy who works for minimum wage? He shouted, losing control. At least I try. At least I had a shot. You just sit around and watch. Don't you dare ruin this weekend for Mom. The sudden, loud confrontation shattered the quiet peace of the cabin. A door immediately opened. Dad walked out onto the porch, followed closely by Mom and Chloe. What is going on out here? Dad demanded, his voice stern, staring at Daniel's red, angry face. Daniel tried to shove the envelope back into his coat, but Mom was too quick. She walked right up to him and demanded, Give me that, Daniel, what have you done? Mom snatched the envelope from Daniel's trembling hand and pulled out the debt notice. She read the figure, $80,000, and her eyes widened in disbelief and pain. Daniel finally broke down, sinking onto the porch steps, hiding his face in his hands. The confession was mute, but total. Daniel, is this true? You've been lying about your job? Dad asked, his voice now heavy with immense disappointment. Yes, I answered for him, unable to watch Daniel suffer. He's been lying for months. He's been borrowing cash from friends to keep up appearances. He's facing court action. Mom didn't look at Daniel. She looked at Dad, and a strange, complicated expression crossed her face. Not anger, but a sudden, desperate fear. The confrontation had triggered the first domino, but the cascade was just beginning. Mom sat down next to Daniel, holding his hand. She looked fiercely protective of her golden boy. It's all right, Daniel. We can fix this. We have the money. Dad looked confused. Eleanor, we don't have $80,000 lying around. Not after the market dip. We'll have to mortgage the house. But we can't afford that right now. Mom squeezed Daniel's hand tighter, staring at Dad with intensity. No, Robert. We don't have to mortgage the house. I have the money. The statement was quiet, simple, and utterly devastating. Dad stood motionless, staring at Mom. Chloe and I exchanged a stunned look. What are you talking about, Eleanor? Dad asked slowly, the realization dawning in his eyes. What money? Mom realized her mistake instantly. In her panic to shield Daniel, she had revealed her own long-held secret. Her eyes darted from Daniel to Dad, betraying her years of hidden guilt. Robert, please, Mom pleaded, her voice cracking. It's an inheritance. My mother left me a large sum of money years ago. I put it away into a separate account. I never touched it. I never told you because I didn't want you to worry about managing it. It's enough to cover Daniel's debt immediately. Dad stared at his wife of 40 years, the shock palpable on his face. The perfect matriarch, the keeper of the peace, had been holding a huge financial secret from him for decades. An inheritance? Dad asked, his voice barely audible. You had a massive account, a life-changing amount of money, and you kept it a secret from me? All these years? Why? Mom's frantic defense of Daniel had exposed lie 1, Daniel's success, which in turn forced her to expose lie 2, the secret inheritance. The truth was cascading through our family's foundation, shaking everything we thought we knew about Mom and Dad's trust. I kept it a secret because I didn't trust you with the money, Robert. Mom confessed, the words bursting out in a rush of desperate honesty. You're too risky. I was afraid you would invest it badly, like you did with the initial college funds. I needed a safety net for the family. Dad took a step back, looking utterly betrayed. The accusation was savage, hitting at a deep-seated vulnerability he would work hard to overcome. He was hurt not just by the secret, but by her lack of faith. You really thought I was such a liability that you had to lie about a fortune? Dad asked, his voice quiet with pain. You had a secret bank account for 20 years. Dad turned away from Mom and walked to the edge of the porch, staring out into the dark trees. He stood there for a long moment, his broad shoulders slumped in total defeat. When he finally turned back, his face was set, and his eyes were full of a new, terrifying clarity. I understand, Dad said quietly, nodding to Mom. You don't trust me, but you did it because you felt you had to protect the family, right, Eleanor? Because you feared financial ruin. Mom stood up, relieved. Yes, Robert, exactly. It was protection. Well, I did the same thing, Dad confessed, his voice heavy with immense sorrow. You thought the lake house burned down, didn't you? All of you. Chloe gasped loudly, covering her mouth with her hands. The entire family knew the story of the beloved family lake house, which was supposedly lost years ago in a sudden, tragic fire. What are you talking about, Dad? I asked, completely confused. The lake house was a tragedy. We saw the insurance photos. We helped you bury the photo albums. Dad shook his head slowly, his eyes fixed on the shocked faces of his children. The lake house never burned down, Liam. I sold it. This was Lie 3, the lake house fire. The silence on the porch was deafening. The initial confrontation about Daniel's death had exposed not one, but 2 decades-long life-altering secrets. Our family history was crumbling before our eyes. Dad continued, his confession heavy. I sold the house 25 years ago. We were facing total bankruptcy after that housing market collapse. The one you thought I recovered from. The insurance money was nothing. I needed cash immediately to pay off crippling debt and secure a clean, fresh start. I sold the house secretly, and I created the fire story to protect all of you from the shame of total ruin. So the house we loved, the place we spent every summer, was never destroyed. Chloe whispered, her eyes filling with tears. You just sold it and lied to us about a fire? Why didn't you ever tell us the truth? Because the shame would have destroyed us, Dad repeated, echoing Mom's earlier defense. I couldn't bear for you children to see your father fail that badly. I sold the house. I paid the debt, and I used the remaining money to start a new, solid life insurance policy. It was a trade, a house for your future security. He looked directly at Mom. I lied because I thought the financial truth would hurt the family. Just like you lied because you thought the financial truth would hurt the family. Our entire stability has been built on decades of these defensive secrets. The revelation stopped there, leaving the 4 of us standing on the porch, staring at the ruins of our family history. The dominoes had fallen, and nothing would ever be the same. The immediate aftermath was a stunned silence, followed by an explosion of chaotic emotion. Daniel, stripped of his pride and his lie, retreated into self-pity, sobbing uncontrollably. Mom, her perfect image shattered, was furious at Dad for matching her betrayal with an even bigger one. Chloe was the one who reacted with surprising empathy. She walked over to Dad and hugged him tightly. You lied to save us, Dad. You sacrificed the house we loved to keep us safe. That's a huge burden to carry. I, however, felt a cold, not a betrayal. It wasn't just the lies. It was the realization that my parents viewed us, their children, as so fragile that they couldn't handle the reality of their struggles. The family foundation was a house of cards constructed from shame and fear. Mom pulled away from Daniel, her anger directed solely at Dad. But you lied about a tragedy, Robert. A massive emotional deception. My lie was just about money. A safety net. A safety net you hid from your husband, Eleanor. Dad countered, his voice rising in pain. We faced financial collapse alone. We could have rebuilt the house together. We could have faced the debt together. But you chose to operate in secret because you didn't trust me. Their argument was heartbreaking, revealing decades of quiet distrust that had been papered over by the appearance of a perfect marriage. Daniel, now feeling overshadowed, started muttering about the debt collector again. I walked over to the edge of the porch, needing space. The mountain air, so clean just an hour ago, now felt thick with the stench of long-held lies. The rest of the evening was a chaotic blur of accusation and withdrawal. Daniel, unable to cope, packed his bag immediately and drove away without saying goodbye, fleeing the scene of his own public humiliation. Mom locked herself in her room, refusing to speak to anyone, especially Dad. Chloe, the surprising anchor, stayed with Dad. She sat with him on the porch, quietly trying to process the immense weight of his 25-year lie. She reminded him that his intentions, however flawed, came from a place of love and protection. I wandered the cabin, feeling like a ghost in my own family's reckoning. The truth was out, but it hadn't brought relief. It had brought systemic damage. I realized that the lies were worse than the initial problems they tried to conceal. The debt and financial struggles were manageable. The destruction of trust was not. The next morning, the remaining three of us, Mom, Dad, and I, sat awkwardly at the huge wooden dining table. Chloe had driven to the nearest town to get coffee, sensing the need for a neutral presence. The silence was thick. Mom finally looked up, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "I'm sorry, Robert," she said, her voice small. "I was wrong to keep the inheritance. I let fear rule me. And I was wrong to lie about the fire, Eleanor," Dad admitted, his voice equally strained. "I let my shame rule me." But the apologies were uncomfortable. They were attempts to fix 40 years of history with a few rush words. The fact remained that two people who promised honesty had lived separate, secret financial lives to protect an image of perfection. Chloe returned, placing 3 mugs of coffee on the table. She sat down, looking calm. "We can't fix 20 years in 10 minutes," Chloe stated simply. "But we have to decide what we do now. Daniel is gone. The lake house is gone. The facade is gone. What is left?" That was the crucial question. What was left when a fundamental trust was annihilated? I finally spoke, my voice steady. What is left is the truth and the choice to never lie again. Daniel's debt has to be handled honestly, and Mom's inheritance needs to be put back into the joint estate. Mom nodded immediately. "I've already called my bank. The transfer is starting today. Daniel's debt will be paid immediately." We spent the rest of the day in uncomfortable attempts to process the new reality. We slowly pieced together the timeline. Dad sold the lake house a year before Mom received her inheritance. If Dad had been honest about the sale, Mom wouldn't have felt the need to hide her inheritance. One lie directly caused the other. The domino effect was tragic. I realized that my initial anger at Daniel's selfishness was misguided. Daniel was just the spark. The real problem was the culture of shame and secrecy our parents had built to protect us, which had nearly destroyed them. My image of the successful, stable family was forever shattered, replaced by a much messier, much more human reality. The reckoning was long and difficult. Dad had to face the shame of his past financial failure, and Mom had to face her lack of faith in her husband. They decided they needed professional help to navigate the fallout of the decades of secrecy. Chloe and I realized we had to redefine our relationships with them. We weren't just their children anymore. We were adults who had been deceived and now needed to choose to forgive them for their protective dishonesty. Daniel was the biggest victim, not the debt, but the facade. His whole identity was built on a lie of success that his parents desperately needed to believe. When the lie broke, he had nothing left. I called Daniel a week later. He was back in the city, staying with an old friend. He was depressed, but sobered by the events. "I have nothing left, Liam," he confessed. "I've been alive for years. I don't even know what I'm good at." "You're good at starting over, Daniel." I told him. "The debt is handled. Mom transferred the money. Now you can stop lying and actually build a life, just like Dad had to do when he sold the lake house." The knowledge that both parents had operated under deep, protective lies seemed to comfort him slightly. He wasn't the only failure. He was part of a family built on fear. Mom and Dad decided to stay at the cabin for an extra week, alone, to start the hard work of rebuilding their trust. They needed to talk through every moment, every lie, and every fear they had hidden from each other. Chloe and I drove back home, the silence in the car filled with a heavy understanding of our new, exposed reality. We were both sad, but also relieved. The air was finally clear. The storm had passed, but the landscape was changed forever. We realized that love and stability are not built on perfect appearances. They are built on messy, painful honesty. The aftershocks continued for months. Every time a memory of the lake house came up, the silence was tense, knowing the truth behind the fire. Every time Mom mentioned her mother, Dad had to manage the pain of the hidden fortune. But the honesty was healing. They were finally communicating, arguing openly, and making shared financial decisions. The shame and secrecy were gone. The most profound realization was mine. The domino effect of truth had destroyed a false family, but it created a chance for a real one to emerge from the wreckage. The memory of the idyllic cabin reunion will forever be tainted by the shouts, the tears, and the confessions. It was the weekend our family shattered, but also the weekend we finally started to rebuild. I learned that the most dangerous secrets are not the ones kept from the world, but the ones kept within the home, even when motivated by love. That quiet truth, accidentally discovered, had blown up our reunion, but it had saved our future.